Okay, well, thank you very much for joining and for the fantastic questions and discussion. Um, for the second part of this evening, we're going to focus on before, during, and after a disaster, but in particular, COVID-19 and coronavirus. And I'm going to talk about what some others around the country are doing for getting ready and some of the special considerations for Puerto Rico. And looking forward to the discussion on this section also. Just a note, so this is going to be the first lesson for the business owners and an opportunity for you all to engage with the business owners as mentors and as entrepreneurial support practitioners. I'm just going to breeze through the previous parts that we did in the introduction with Lynn and setting the scene. For tonight, I'm going to have a background on Puerto Rico and COVID-19, a guest speaker, Norma Albertorio, founder and executive director of the Centro de Emprendedores and leader of the startups of Puerto Rico. I'm going to look at 3 exercises that the business owners are going to undertake for their second class related to scenario planning for their businesses. Next topic, building resilience and readying for pent-up demand, and the COVID-19 recovery plan. For Puerto Rico and COVID-19, been a very difficult situation as with the rest of the United States and the rest of the world. But as you can see from the graph on the left, it hasn't been a real peak or a real acceleration. It's just been somewhat steady, but relatively over time, with some weekly peaks, about 20 or 30 or 40 cases per day, and a mortality rate that's relatively low compared to many other states and territories. So all in all, Puerto Rico has done really well from the health standpoint over the last several months. But from the business standpoint, really quite a great challenge. This was a survey done by Columna 66 from March 20th to April 4th, about 625 respondents, and you can see many businesses having a greatly difficult time. 60% temporarily closed, 80% not having savings, 17% could pay payroll for more than 4 weeks, and 12% partially based upon the business with limited ability to work remotely. As you can see, the respondents of this survey had a size distribution relatively close to the distribution of the business owners course, with the exception that we have a higher percentage in the business owners course of attendees or participants with a greater than 100 number of employees. I think a good way or an interesting way to think about coronavirus is with this quote from Industry Week on how demand, supply, and workforce availability are affected globally at the same time. And that's indeed what makes it quite different than other disasters. One, that all 3 of demand, supply, and workforce are affected, but also that it's not regional or national, but truly global. And so I think in recovery, businesses will need to look at and are looking at each of these, demand, supply, and workforce, but also what global considerations there might be for them in their region and in their country or state or territory. Some of the unique characteristics of Puerto Rico in regard to COVID and natural disasters in general is the percentage of small businesses. So many small businesses, but significant percentage of the workforce. So these small businesses historically have less resiliency than many of the larger businesses, partially because of their reliance on a relatively small number of customers, reliance on a relatively small number of suppliers, and in many cases not having the cash resources or financial resources that the larger businesses and companies might have. Both resources in hand, but also access to outside funding sources. Many of the businesses in Puerto Rico, small businesses, have revenue of $250,000 or less. Many have tried to take advantage of the payroll protection plan through the federal government. Another challenge that is somewhat unique to Puerto Rico with coronavirus is the ongoing recovery from Hurricanes Irma and Maria and the 2019-2020 earthquakes. So many natural disasters, but also many natural disasters are occurring within a relatively short time frame, and also in occurring through a relatively short time frame, not having recovered fully from one natural disaster before another occurs. You can see on the left-hand side of the slide, a little bit small, just from April of this year, announcement from FEMA of funding of 97 new hurricane recovery projects. So right during the time of coronavirus, FEMA announcing the additional funding of the release for additional funding. So the recoveries are ongoing from Irma and Maria. One of the attendees and entrepreneurial support participants today mentioned how about 5% of the Puerto Rico population moved to the U.S. After Maria and Irma. So population also ramifications. So the continued recovery and upgrade of the electrical grid is a current factor in recovery. Limitations of broadband wireless, economic downturn over the last 10 years or so, and somewhat continuing. And I think the demographics too, so not just some of the population having moved to the United States, hopefully temporarily, but also aging society. So Puerto Rico, one of the U.S. states and territories with more rapidly aging society or more aged society than others, providing a challenge too. This chart is actually quite good, I think, or quite visual. And it looks at across the top how long or how much of a revenue impact there has been for coronavirus for an industry within Puerto Rico or around the world, and then how sustainable that might be. There's other charts like this in industry and government and in business schools. I think one that's quite interesting, that's similar, is what the risk is from IT for somebody's business, and if the business is at great risk for technological change, more of an immediacy for a digital transformation or doing something new or reacting or adapting. Here too, some businesses have had positive revenue growth, which we'll look at. Others a short-term downturn. Others quite severe, such as cruises and oil and gas, hotels, restaurants in many cases, and some catastrophic. So the question for these businesses is how quickly the rebound will be in general across the United States, and how much that will vary by state or region. So to what extent will the Puerto Rico businesses and revenue loss in tourism recover quickly or less quickly than other parts of the country? One interesting, from this last weekend actually, so many of the localities which are starting to open up in states and regions of the U.S., the restaurant demand has picked up fairly quickly, although there are the capacity limits from state and local government of 25 and 50%. Las Vegas has been different this last weekend, and partially I think that's due to that the fact that Las Vegas is to a large extent a travel destination or a tourism destination, and a large part of the revenue is from travelers and tourists. So their restaurants, even with considering the 25% cap, quite a slow weekend initially. So I think for Puerto Rico and Puerto Rican businesses, mapping for themselves what the impact has been and how quickly it might come back. And we'll talk about some other industries. Some I think are quite surprising how quickly they are coming back. And has Norma joined, and can you move her into a panelist, please? Well, we'll come back when Norma is joined and ready to Norma's talk. Okay. Lynn referenced this chart, which I think is a good chart for coronavirus too. So it's not just bouncing back, but it's the extent that's possible for your business to bounce back better, forward better. And so that'll be possible for many businesses or some businesses who have had to adapt through the last 2 months, had to develop alternative supply chains, alternative distribution channels, different ways of doing business. For those who didn't have the cash resources over the last 2 months and may not have the cash resources to restart, then they won't be able to obviously bounce back better, but they'll have to, the owners, pivot to something new. So here is understanding when to pivot, or thinking through realistically when to pivot, given a business owner and community's understanding of how quickly that industry will come back, given the local and regional context of Puerto Rico. So what are some businesses?
I think Norma's here.
Okay.
Now.
Well, thank you, Norma, for joining.
Super.
The microphone is yours.
Okay, so I am going to talk a little bit about what is happening right now in Puerto Rico with the small businesses that we are helping through a program that we have that is called Negocios SOS or Business SOS. Right now, we are helping 116 small businesses. We have data for 45 of them. So these 45 businesses represent 210 jobs. And right now, from those 210 jobs, there are only 74 of them working. So 35% of their employees are working right now. And they represent and they have been earning only 18% of their sales. So we are dealing with this reality right now. The difference between the situation of the businesses from the rest of the island and the south part of the island are very strong difference and very different situations. Yes, they received the PPP loans, a lot of them, but not in the first round, in the second round. So they are like receiving right now all that money, and that is important for them. In general, the general feeling of them is that they are looking to reinvent themselves, and they are looking to transition online, so that it's good. But they don't necessarily have all the skills. Roughly like 93% of them ask us for help or support to transition their businesses or some part of their operations to online. And that is very important information for us because it helps us to create new programs. We recently launched a program to help them transition online, and we opened a call for applications 2 days ago, and we already met our goal for that program. So there is a huge need for that. There's a huge need for them to work with the anxiety and all the the uncertainty of dealing with the COVID and all the changes that they have to do. And also in the south part of the island, we can see a lot of fear and preoccupation, and fear of open again, and fear of getting sick, and fear of they getting sick and go to their homes, and that their families get sick too. So that is like a very complicated scenario, and for us is complicated too, because it's hard to deal not only with the financial pressure or the reinvention of them. We are talking about human beings with families, and that their businesses is all they got. So you are talking about people that are getting that are not producing, that they are not getting enough money, and we have small business owners like having to eat their inventory because they don't have more money, or they have a very serious situation, and that's the thing that we have been finding, and it is more dramatic in the south part of the island. So I have like a lot of fear for that part, because I don't know if we can have all the resources that they need to move out this situation. You can plan for a lot of things, and you can plan for a hurricane or an earthquake or a fire, but the combination of all these elements all together, it's very difficult to foresee, to be able to foresee these things, and to be able to plan for the combination of all of these. So we can have some basic things that we are working with them, but the reality is that I think from my side that none of us has all the complete set of tools to work with them. We have actually, Jose, we have a psychologist. We have two working with us. One is concentrated in one project in particular, and the other we brought another one to work with us in this program right now, and in part with the participants and the small business owners, and with us as a team, to give us tools and ways to deal with all this information that we are receiving. We did this after the hurricane too. So when the Hurricane Maria and Irma came, with a program with Foundation for Puerto Rico, we work with 265 small business owners. I don't remember right now, it was a lot. And the stress that caused on us as a team was very hard to work with. At the end of that year, I gave all my team like 3 weeks of vacation, because it was super necessary. We have to unplug ourselves on all this. I think that working on resiliency programs and hearing all these stories, it's hard for us, but we have to give them the tools to work with that. So it's very complex, these things, but there is there is a big emotional component. Yes, I think that we have already resilient small business owners. They survived Maria, but it's like I survived this huge thing, and now I have to survive this another thing that I don't understand again. So it's a thing of a lot of information, and don't having a way to process it like in a standard way for everyone. And I know that this is new for every one of us, everyone. Us as nonprofits or supporters or practitioners, us as universities, us as the government, us as the banks and the financial institutions. So this is a whole new arena for everyone. But I think that at the end of the day, we can't forget that we are talking with human beings, that they are making decisions, that these decisions are affected by their emotions. Yes, we cannot get that out of the equation. We are talking about businesses that were working for the last 10, 20 years, 5 years, 3 months, and when that founder or president or person responsible of that business is taking the decisions that they have to make right now, it's very hard to. So that's the thing that we have been seeing down there. Also, there's a lot of people that wanted to start something because their reality changed. Their family scenarios change too, so they can be able to work as they used to. And there are new opportunities too right now. We also launched a program for people that want to start a business that is full too. So that gives us information that we are transforming. Everyone is in that process right now. So I am very looking forward to a lot of the tools and the information that you are going to tell us, because I think that from my standpoint, these things we are going to make it or use it like right now. Part of the team of Centro para Emprendedores is taking these trainings too, because we need tools. We need tools to work with these small business owners. And we are like using a lot of things that you are talking about, but it's more like a common sense methodology that we have been developed in the way. And these come from the interviews that we have with the people. This comes from the assessments that we made from the businesses. So we are trying to have, or our program is tailored to have very customized conversations with these business owners, with really useful tools for them to make these decisions and to prepare their businesses or to and then their teams, and to work with the financial structure that they need to start again or restart, or to say this is enough for me, or this business is not going to survive these new changes and to close. So that's basically what we have been doing in the past month or so.
Nerma, there is a very interesting question from Jose Vega in the panel. He's asking you if you would say that we need to incorporate in the support teams specialists from the mental health disciplines.
I think that yes. We brought one to the team. We have always recognized that the mental health is an important part of the entrepreneurial process, because you have to take a lot of decisions and you have to work with that skills. But right now, yes, the anxiety levels, they need tools to decompress information, stress, the pressure, all of that. And if you are a business analyst, or you are a marketing specialist, or you are a super financial person, that's okay, but you don't have the training that a psychologist have, or a counselor have, or someone with that background. And for me, it has been super important to have one person or two with that background to help us work with the conversations that we have to have with the business owners.
Very good.
So,
Is there another question or two for Nirma?
Yes.
I just think Nirma's point about the mental health and the sociological counseling is really, really important. It's being evaluated going forward.
I think so, because if you think in the models of a lot of our organizations, it's like a business support organization, and you give business support services. But what happens with the person? So I think that there's a person making decisions, and those decisions have some weight, and you have to know how to manage if you have to close your business, and how you are going to work with your employees, and how you are going to have that conversation. And when you have to go and say to your people, hey, I can't pay you anymore, that things are not easy to do. And certainly a lot of them want to protect their employees, and making that decision, it's hard, and it's got to be based on your financials. So being able to get them to see their financials and to talk and to take that decisions from the financial statements, it's not so simple. It's not like, okay, this is my income statement or my cash flow, and I know that this is what I have to do, but I don't want to do it, so I am going to put all my personal money here, even though I know that at the end I'm going to close. So that kind of things, it's the things that are happening in the mind of this business owner, and that is not just an accounting equation.
So there was a question from a little earlier regarding businesses with relatively small, so less than 10 employees, as to who they might turn to for advice in developing plans or developing strategies for their business, or what types of mentorships might be available for them in Puerto Rico.
There's not a lot of organizations like doing that kind of thing. We are asking them right now if they are receiving some services from other organizations, and they, in the 116 persons that we have, they have only mentioned another one beside us, and 2 organizations doing this is not a lot. We don't have like a huge bandwidth, so we need to take care about that part too. I know that I have colleagues here from a lot of places, but we cannot wait until they call us. We have to make the reach out, because they don't know what to do. They don't know what to do. That's the thing. Actually, when they they submit a form in our website asking for support. And I had a few calls with people that told me that they were surprised because we called them. They wasn't expecting someone to really answer their call, and that surprised me a lot, because it was like, hey, I'm looking, but there's a lot of people looking too. So that's the thing. I know that it's complicated, but yeah, need to work. Yeah, Andrea is studying there that we need to be careful if they expect a magic wand, and that's part of what we as a support organization have to do and to have that conversations. We are aware of that. We don't have a magic wand, and I wish I can resolve everything, but I know that we don't. Our team knows that too. We have our method here to work with that, and we discuss all of our sessions, and we discuss and like mentor each other to work with the participants. So it has been a process that we have been developed as we are walking through it.
Thank you. Len or Bob or Annie or Gloria or Gilberto, do you have any thoughts or comments or questions for Nirma?
I'm good. There are a couple of interesting comments. Of course, we have all of this. Sorry about the dog. All of this disaster in a bundle, right? Puerto Rico is a disaster in a bundle right now. So, but yes, definitely the mental health. It's one of the things that is going to impact the most on the long run. And we already had a mental issue here in Puerto Rico under normal circumstances. So.
Yeah, but in general, I see the good faith in all of this and small business owners. From my experience and by our programs, at the end of the day, they want to do it good. They want to be able to pay their employees, be able to serve their clients. They want to be able to reinvent themselves. So they are able to. They know that they need to rethink a lot of aspects of their businesses. So that part is good. That part, it also surprised me right now, because in every call that we have made, the perception that we have and the attitude is that I know that I need to do these things. How do I do it? Where are the tools? Where do I go? So I think that they are doing their part with the resources that they have. We need to be able to serve more of them, or to help them more, or to grow all these programs, or to be able to help them all across the island. That's the thing that I have learned from this. I learned it too from the hurricanes, when we went out there and we walked in a lot of municipalities here, and we went business by business making interviews. A lot of them told us that, don't worry about me, my neighbor needs help, please go to them and help them. And a lot of business owners were able to identify other colleagues and talk to us about the situations of others. And I think that is huge from them. So it's a matter of keeping to grow our ecosystem, and to be able for us to be able to get more knowledge to do this better and better and better.
Nirma, there are two questions. I'm going to compile them. Somebody is asking briefly, right? What type of business, service, restaurants or manufacturing companies do you service? And if your organization is a non-for-profit organization, how do you support, the businesses? Just a little bit about what do you do? What is your
yes, Centro para Emprendedores is a not-for-profit organization. We have been, this is our 8th year, so we have been working since 2012. Here in Puerto Rico, when we made the program to support small businesses, when Hurricane Maria, it was with the support of Foundation for Puerto Rico. So they had this fund that allow us to work with small business owners and allow us to give them cash grants. Now we have a donation from Popular that allow us to help these other businesses. And we have a donation from Comprometidos, another organization that allows us to make new programs. So we are a nonprofit. Usually we work with education. We have our own curriculum to help people that want to start a business. We have our events, and we have a coaching program. That are our three main pillars of our programs and services: education, coaching, and events. And now when these things happen, well, we develop this small business support program, and we have different kind of funding sources. The Trust is one of our funders too from the beginning. So the Trust help us organizing startup weekends in Puerto Rico. So that's how we more or less operate. And the other question was what kind of businesses we are supporting. There's a lot of restaurants, yes, because when you go out there, there's a lot of them, but there's a lot of professional services. There's some of them that are from the tourism industry. A few from the health industry. So we have a lot.
Retail. Do you have retail?
Yeah,
retail?
We have retail. Yes.
Thank you, Norma.
Okay.
The other comment that was here, I was just checking all the comments in the chat and questions that may be addressed by any of our panelists, was regarding what we can expect after this particular situation with the pandemic in terms of the brain drain. We lost 5% of our population after the hurricanes, and then we had the earthquakes, and now we had the pandemic. So we are expecting that there will be some moves of people leaving the island, but also we are expecting huge changes in the economy here and in the world. So being an island, the brain drain is a big scare for us. Any thoughts on how we can address that and keep our people here?
Actually, I have something to say because it has been very interesting. We are receiving people from the diaspora that are wanting to come back. So they are starting to ask how to start a business in Puerto Rico, and that was fascinating. People that went away 6-8 years ago, and they want to come back, and then they want to come back to start a business here. So we are starting to receive that kind of request in our webpage, and I found it super interesting. Actually, it was there is a niche out there that we can tackle. So I think that there are people that they want to come back. Definitely Puerto Rico is a super place to be. With all of our challenges, I think that we have a lot more to offer, and being part of working with these challenges is I think that a lot of people want to be here and to be part of the transformation that is happening here. I think that we are doing a lot of things that are sounding out there, that they are reading and they are looking about what we are doing. So that for me is a very positive thing, and I think that they need to hear more about what are the good things that are happening here, so they want to come back again.
I love your optimism and positive attitude, and I think that with all the comments we have heard and read about in the past week about folks in California and Silicon Valley and all the technological hubs, that the companies are telling their people that they have to stay remote, that they will be working remotely till December, and they can do it from wherever. There are folks that are going back to their family homes or working from somewhere else. They don't need to be locked in anywhere in Seattle or San Francisco or Boston. So yes, that opens also the opportunity to get talent to come back. And maybe rethink many things. So good. That's good to hear from what you're seeing.
Also, as JP pointed out in the earlier talk, or at the beginning of this talk, the infection rate has been relatively low in Puerto Rico. So in addition to having a pleasant environment in which to live and work, perhaps with friends and family, you have a much lower risk of, at least so far, the virus than in many other parts of the country.
Very good.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much, Norma. Fantastic talk and wonderful work that you and your colleagues are doing, and many of the attendees and the entrepreneur support participants are looking forward to working with you more if they aren't already. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Okay, we'll pick back up, but as we pick up, I thought we could go back several slides and ask Lynn Wells to make a comment on this slide and also on the resiliency graphs, building upon some of Norma's thoughts or adding to them from Lynn's perspectives.
Thanks, JP. No, I thought you did a good job of covering this. The only point I would make is that over on the left-hand side, I mean, the boxes at the top, those companies that have been positively affected by what's going on now, in other words, e-commerce that are increasing business, those have been mildly negatively, which is minus 15% or so in Q4, severely like oil and gas that are 15 to 50%, and catastrophic, which are tourism. Then the curve, the axis on the left is what the recovery is going to look like. And none of us knows what that's going to look like. I think the early estimates of a rapid V bounce recovery are unlikely now. On the other hand, so the boxes there are half-year impact, 1.5-year impact, 3-year impact. On the other hand, there seems to be some good progress being made with some kind of medicines, whether they're, I think a vaccine will be a ways off, but maybe some of these drug treatments will help. And so that really is kind of the kind of scenario planning we talked about in terms of foresight versus forecasting, is if you look at the different options, then how would you design your business model that would give you the most opportunity across whichever scenario develops. And note, though, that in the lower right-hand corner, if you're in a catastrophic environment and it lasts for 3 years, your best bet is probably to try something new. So you could spend hours on this graph, and I think it's really very interesting. I haven't seen the one that JP mentioned from the other source, but this is one we'll use in the scenario planning or in the work planning to help people think through what some of the options are. Over.
Thank you, Lynn. To look at what some businesses are doing or have done, just several, and we'll add others. We'll have others throughout the course. This is a really interesting example from Connecticut, and it's a family of restaurants under one ownership. One a sit-down high-end restaurant, and then some others that are more taverns. And so they augmented their business throughout the shutdown with selling staples and groceries. And so they added a quite robust online presence with it, which they were able to do, but then supplemented what the grocers were able to offer, and really quite successful, and will most likely stay with that after the recovery. HEB is a quite big grocery market chain in Southwest United States, very large presence in Texas, and they did something opposite. So a community effort, they provided shelf space 2 local restaurants within the grocery store. So the restaurants were closed or only open for carryout and delivery, and HEB partnered with them in order to help out. So again, an innovation over the last 2 months. This is here in Alexandria, so this is going forward. So the restaurants in Virginia are going to be limited in capacity, at least for a short amount of time as the state moves through the different government phases from 25% to 50%. So the owners of Landini Brothers approached the city of Alexandria about setting up the very large hospitality tents in this riverfront park. It's on the Potomac River, so that the restaurants can expand their capacity through the next coming months. The initial stages in Virginia are only going to be for patio dining, and so this would be a way for the restaurants to open more quickly. An analogy to this is Stanford University, and they're considering opening up in the fall, but again with these large hospitality tents and not having the students in the classroom, but having the students outside where they can do the spacing and the social distancing in a way that meets takes due precaution and also meets the government guidelines. So Palo Alto having very nice weather, Puerto Rico with quite nice weather for much of the year, and similarly Thailand looking to do things more outside. This is a supply chain example, which is actually quite fascinating. There's a TV series now called Carbon Cowboys, and it's 10 parts, and it's about using crop rotation more than is used in very industrialized agriculture today. And so the farms and the agricultural businesses that are featured on this series, you can see where they are located in the different states. They also sell more directly to the end customer, and because of that, they utilize smaller agricultural or farm processing plants. And so those plants have not had the coronavirus outbreaks that the very, very large ones do. And so these businesses have seen their sales go up quite significantly over the last 2 months. And so again, a potential benefit to them looking forward. As we've discussed, and as many of the comments have noted, and as the Colmena 66 survey noted, not all businesses are in a position financially to reopen, and that'll be even more true depending on the type of recovery. This is a very sad circumstance in Manhattan. This is a business that started in 1985, and a quite famous one and well recognized, not just in Manhattan, but around the country. And you can see the second paragraph, ironically, this past March 17th would be the last time Coogan's closed its doors when they had to with the government mandate. We had hoped to open them again, but sadly it is just not possible. And that's from the three founders. So much sadness also through business around the country. So as part of the business owners class, we're going to ask them for themselves to do three assessments or 3 scenario plans for opening their business, and we'll talk about them briefly, again being cognizant of time. One's an impact assessment, short, medium, and long term on their customer, suppliers, and staff, financial scenario planning into the future, and then a small business reopening plan. Here's and these are all relatively take relatively short amount of time, relatively straightforward for a business owner to think about and make a self-assessment as to where they are, where they'll be given their industry. So this is just going to ask the owners for the short, medium, and long-term impact on their customers, suppliers, and staff over the last 2 months. And that'll give them some insight into what might have to happen or what type of path the recovery will have to take. to assess what the impact will be for them in the coming months and what they'll need to do to reopen. And it takes a realistic understanding of customers and suppliers and staff. My wife and I, last couple of Sundays, have taken drives here in Northern Virginia. And Northern Virginia is still under a shutdown. So able to drive, but the business is still not able to open the restaurants for indoor seating or indoor dining, but still able to provide carryout. And there's vast differences here in Northern Virginia from city to city. So city of Alexandria, for example, there were many residents on the streets buying something to eat from the restaurants and buying a beer or a glass of wine and sitting outside or sitting in that Founders Park. While in Arlington, there was hardly anyone out. So the Alexandria businesses understand their customers and understand Alexandria. Similarly, very few people out in Arlington. New York City, many thousands of people out this last weekend, even though New York City has some of the tightest restrictions in the country. And the New York City government actually quite concerned about the number of people going to the beaches for Memorial Day weekend. But again, it's understanding your customers, suppliers, and staff. And then understanding the current financial situation, considerations, cash flow, whether there's decreased receivables or revenues, salaries and vendor payments, the ability to defer payments such as rent, insurance, and to what extent the business has applied for and been successful with the payroll protection program and the economic disaster assistance loans. Here in Virginia, there's some state funding available, and in Fairfax County, there's some funding available for nonprofits with meeting certain criteria. And so there's availability at the regional level too of some programs. And then we're going to ask them to do a cash flow scenario planning, this one, under 3 scenarios. One, an optimistic opening scenario in regard to restrictions from the government and customers returning. Second, more realistic, and third, a pessimistic one, that things may not come back that quickly with customers. And then on the third column over under each scenario, notes. So notes that the business might undertake or initiatives they might undertake under these different scenarios. So for example, the pessimistic scenario may well mean furloughing of employees. I'm on the board of several nonprofits, and one of our scenarios under the pessimistic standpoint, one of them is the performing arts, is potentially furloughing employees for not starting for a while, but if they aren't able to do performances into the fall or next spring, I think in that circumstance that it might be a net necessary for that nonprofit. And then you can see the red, government funding they're obtaining, and then new COVID expenses, which we'll discuss in a second. Someone mentioned in the chat facilities considerations and the new exposure control plan, which encompasses monitoring of personnel, distancing control measures, ventilation requirements, cleaning and disinfectants, and PPE. So there's a cost for that. And then Annie and Gloria and Gilberto are arranging for a speaker to talk about these exposure control plans and more in detail in the self-certifications and the ramifications for small businesses. But really quite important, I think Puerto Rico in some ways is undertaking something here that at least some of the other states are not requiring to this extent. One of the chat comments was to rethink everything, or at least consider everything as to what might stay the same and what might be different. And so in each of these areas for customers and suppliers, the business will have worked through what the current impact is this is going forward as to what the initiatives might be for resilience, including on IT, e-commerce, insurance, and financial management, and all of these things together that lead to the revenues and not the profit and loss and the long-term viability. This is going to vary by community and by state, territory, and part of the country, and based upon the customers. But I think there's been a remarkable number of businesses that have reopened that have sold out fairly quickly. Again, I mentioned the Las Vegas restaurant example where that's not been their experience. This is Disney Shanghai, which sold out quite quickly, certainly around the U.S. for barbers and barber shops and those types of businesses selling out quite quickly. I've been quite surprised at the cruises that seem to be selling out for July and August because there you're on a ship, and if there are coronavirus, you're going to be quarantined on the ship for a little while. But there too, selling out and being quite popular. So it'll vary by region, but something to consider. Hurricane season, we've had quite a few comments on too. So preparations are going to be different this year, and certainly for Puerto Rico and Florida and Louisiana and South Carolina and states that have many hurricanes or risk of many hurricanes, going to be quite different. So some of the areas are increased communications, difference in earlier evacuations, more shelters because you can't have as many people, increased transportation needs, increased staffing needs. This is, New Orleans has something called evacu spots, and they have these 15 or 16 foot statues, which you can see on the diagram there. This is at one of their evacu spots. Jefferson Parish, for example, that Lynn mentioned, the residents and citizens are going to have to meet there about 10 to 15 hours sooner than last year because of the coronavirus preparations and needing to take everyone's temperature before they go onto a bus, needing to have only one person in each of the 3-seat bus seats, and to take them to many different places. So that's quite a difference. And so there's going to be increased communications from the New Orleans government to the population. But I think Florida is going to be quite similar. There won't be as many of the very large sheltering facilities. Many of the states or communities are looking to partner with hotels to some extent. And this is the last exercise. We all be very helpful. So looking at the business to the extent necessary, reimagining parts of it, and looking at what they might do short-term, medium-term, and long-term. A lot of the short-term, or some of it will be driven by the exposure control plan, but also driven by how to get customers back while verifying or ascertaining that they have the supply and the distribution and the staff. There are considerations for the staff. There's been a discussion nationwide about some staff not wanting to come back if they're on unemployment or having unemployment benefits greater than their salaries. I think the government clarifying that over the last few days is that the part of the unemployment contract or arrangement is if you are offered the opportunity to go back, that you do so. This is a big issue with the payroll protection plan too, for the companies having the loans, the loan waived or the repayment waived. Long-term opportunities. So opportunities for new products and services, supply chains, and broad distribution. Many companies have started this, but with the risks of uncertain demand and increased costs, including for compliance. The course itself is going to focus on readying for the next event. Perhaps, Bob, if you would like to comment on the different elements of this. You're on mute.
Yeah, these this is the overall program in the lesson series, which we first of all, as Lynn talked about earlier, covered the baseline. And there's the anticipate, withstand, recover, and adapt, and then measure the outcomes. And when we go through lessons 3, 4, 5, and 6, the practitioners, this will be implied in all of the areas that we're looking at. So each one of these breaks out, and is the next slide?
Oh, yes.
Do we have slides of each one of these, or? Okay, so. All right, so go back. Okay, so in the anticipate phase, we're gonna need to concentrate on plans that talk about how we build resilience into what we're doing. Withstand phase has to deal with once the actual event occurs, whether it's an earthquake, hurricane, whatever disaster, we're going to have to figure out how a business sustains itself. I remember in the chat there was one comment that really stuck with me, and that is businesses don't want to close, they want to survive. And that's what needs to happen during this phase of a disaster, is that you have to somehow or another figure out how to withstand the disaster and survive. Bootstrapping is a term that we use in entrepreneurship. I use in entrepreneurship courses, but in this situation, it's more severe than bootstrapping. It's more like survival. It's more like innovation. It's more like whatever you need to do in order to withstand the disaster that is befalling you. The recovery phase is equally as important because you have to think through the various options. The slide that both you and Linton talked to about the different phases and whether or not you have a slight impact or a really long-term severe impact will determine how you recover. If you are able to get the resources that you need, or figure out how to stand yourself back up quickly, that's very fortunate. But in most cases, particularly in the Puerto Rican situation with so much going on at one time, it's going to be difficult for all businesses in order to recover. I didn't say anything when we talked about the New Orleans situation, but in New Orleans, that was a situation that we had, is that there was so much of the infrastructure wiped out, it was very difficult to get anything going, and it took a while for all the businesses to recover. Lastly, adapt and reposition. Even businesses that are in so-called stable economies go through cycles, down cycles, when they come back out, they don't look the same. They don't operate the same. They look at their situation and they come to the realization that they can't do business the way they did business before. And so they make plans to become a different kind of an entity that can cater to either the same market or a different market. But to be able to adapt is one of the key things. And then, of course, we are going to measure the outcomes of what we're doing here. All right?
Thank you very much, Bob. And thank you all for joining, and looking forward to discussing any questions or comments that you might have.
We do have a couple of questions in the question and answer section. From Ricky Lopez, he's mentioning with about 3 or 4 small businesses, having 10 or less employees, 3 out of 4. The bulk, if not all, the responsibility of resiliency planning and its 4 steps falls in the shoulders of the founder, owner, entrepreneur. Therefore, a balancing act for him, her, battling continuity versus adaptation, it's a struggle. So what recommendations or resources do you suggest for training and development of employees, subcontracting, etc.? Because it's all in the shoulders of the business owner.
Yeah, I might also add on that comment is the business owner, particularly in a small business, is not only the head of the business, he or she is the head of the family. And so they have family pressures as well as the business pressures. In many instances, the family and the business are the same, and so the family has to, the business and the family have to deal with this same crisis the same way. The same people are in the same situation. And so it calls for innovative and creative ways in order to survive, particularly in the short term. But clearly in the long term, somehow or another you have to come out of this and be better or repositioned better than you were before you went in.
Yeah.
I know JP has a lot to say on this issue.
Thank you, Bob. I think too, well, there's the NGOs and the organizations such as Gilberto's, Annie's, and also Gloria's, and Nirma's. I think too, chambers of commerce and community chambers and professional associations can play a big role in assisting businesses with resilience, and also they play a significant role if a business isn't able to continue, but to enable the owner and the staff and the employees to move to a different one. I think it certainly varies by field and by region, but some of the chambers are quite vibrant and provide support for smaller businesses. Some of the professional associations, I think, can be fantastic. And so I think that the challenge, as you note, is even for a business much larger than 3 to 10 people, the challenge for executives to structure their day to be able to look at strategic issues and not just be involved in day-to-day operations. But I think the community and networking is a big part of it, and Puerto Rico, through Annie and Gilberto and Gloria, and many others have a quite vibrant, I think, community and increasingly supportive support system.
Yeah, there was another question from Ricky Lopez. From Tito Colorado. Tito, hello. Tito is a former head of economic development and Secretary of State, and a big supporter of small and middle enterprises in the island. He's asking if there are any countries or regions in particular that you suggest we look as good examples. I know you have addressed this from a specific disaster point of view, but from the point of view of how the countries approach resiliency, and especially for economic development.
Well, I think there's resiliency in general, and then I think there's some fascinating country experiences with coronavirus. So I think resiliency in general, Japan is an excellent approaches to it in governance, and I think they have an interesting way of cooperation between the government and private sector, and a fairly long-term development of a government vision of where they would like to go. The Japanese government has provided incentives for Japanese businesses to move back to Japan from China, and so I think that's been really quite interesting. From the coronavirus standpoint, I think Taiwan is one of the countries that have done really interesting and the best in many ways. partially it's a result of their really dynamic digital government, the investment they've made over the last 20 years. So they were able, very early in January, to connect their custom and border system to their health systems and identify everyone returning from China when they went to the doctor, and also seeing if they might have a fever. They were also able quite quickly, working with the private sector and government-private partnerships, to set up mobile apps to see where masks were available and public-private masks were available and other PPE. They set up through the 7-Elevens and the convenience stores. The government already has kiosks in most of the 7-Elevens to do government services, and through the kiosks in the 7-Elevens, residents were able to go to the kiosk, put an advance order in for delivery the next week of masks. So they've done many things, and because of that, Taiwan never shut down, such as our states have done. That the schools remained open and the businesses remained open with social distancing guidelines, but they were able to balance fairly well public health with the economy. And in fact, the last 12 days, they've had no new diagnosed cases, and it's slowly opening up more and more. So I think there will be examples of countries who have done the coronavirus approach the way U.S. has, and I think we'll be able to learn, and we'll share with all of you and with the business owners some of what countries seem to be doing well that way. Lynn, do you have a comment on that question?
Yeah, no, I think there's a question here about there's some counties. Well, the countries. I think Iceland, New Zealand, Taiwan, and even and South Korea seem to be the ones that are getting the most play. But I'm wondering in the U.S. if there are trying to be some counties that.
Well, I think so. There's a very high percentage of counties that had less than 1 or 2 cases. I think an interesting state has been South Dakota in regard to how they categorize the population for risk. And so they have 3 categories. One is 80 and older, they consider high risk. The next category is 45 to 80 with one major illness, one comorbidity, and then 45 and below with 2 or more. And so that's how they're looking at reopening. And again, with a focus on those 3 categories of their population. And with, I think, some of an effort or a view that having a population immunity earlier than they would if they keep everything quite closed. But a risk prioritization, I think, is many of the states are trying to do, and Florida did it too, with Florida placing a very large emphasis on assisted living and nursing home, including having a National Guard at some of the assisted living for helping and taking temperatures and things like that.
So Annie and Gloria and Gilberto, I think we have exceeded our limit here. We're more than willing to stay around and answer questions if people like, but and I know some people have to leave. So whatever the best way forward is, we'll defer to you.
Thank you very much for our panelists to be here and for all of you that have stayed. I have to congratulate you all because we had about 163 people, and until 8:30, we had almost 147 people all the time. So that was about 90% of all of the people that registered stay with us the 2.5 hours. We know it's a long night. We don't want to take a little bit of more of your time.
Thank you very much, our dear friends from George Mason, Linton, Jean-Pierre, Bob, Peng, and all the support people in George Mason, and our dear friends in the trust, Annie, Gilberto, Lucy, and all the friends in Colmena.